Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor. I'm your host, Matt Endricken, and this is the Monday Mailbag for March 31st, 2025. It's been a bit of a downtrodden weekend after some results, a 0-2 loss to Loudoun United. We're not going to unpack that too much here, but we are going to get your comments, your thoughts, your feelings, your raw takes. Jason, you're here with us. Mr. Carey, it's been an interesting end to a weekend here. We've got lots of comments, but first impressions, overall thoughts. Where's your head right now?
I mean, it was a rough one. I mean, we'll get to see how some other people here, like you said, feel in a second. I wasn't happy with the performance, but I also think that I've seen worse. So it's frustrating, but I'm not going to lose hope yet. I still felt that there was still effort from the team, and I think that if we start to not see then that becomes incredibly frustrating.
I mean, we posted the question with the results. Was this the worst game ever? Lots of different feelings, lots of different thoughts there. We'll just go through them because there's so many comments to go through. So we're going to kind of drain this really fast and then get back to our thoughts and kind of see where we can reinforce or echo along the way. So we just asked, was this the worst game ever? Brattle Girl writes, yep, boys need a talking to. Bruce writes in, no, absolutely not. Matt Hands writes in, remember, third game of the season last year was a 4-1 loss at Tampa Bay. Maybe that's one of those ones where, volume of goals versus performance on the pitch. It's an interesting thought.
I think that one might have been a little worse, but they're close maybe in a way.
I think, to the Matt Hands comment, I think one of the things that is always more frustrating is when you are in the lead and then you end up losing the game, right? Because at that point, you got ahead. You could change your tactics. You could change how you wanted to play and let the other team do a lot more work to try to get to an equalizer or to best you, right? When you're chasing the game, it's always a different story. But in the Tampa game, I believe we had the first goal, right? Wasn't it the long ball from Lee to Chico? Yeah.
The first one.
So I'm that may be the one still. But, you also say at the same time, that game was our third game ever. This may be our third game of 2025, but this is a team who has now played, 34 plus playoffs, plus Open Cup, plus now the first season. They're over 40, 2 games now. So, it's not exactly the same dimensions here. Craig answered, yes, full stop. This was the worst game ever. Interesting one on this one. Frank and Stoneman are hurting our defense. They need to step it up or they need to go to the bench. Lawn Wrangler writes in, pretty awful. Couldn't finish after the 60th minute, and I didn't even start until the 37th as I was watching the Revs escape an equally potentially crappy situation, but it was a less crappy game than usual. Revs finally won their first game on a PK that was basically given to them. I mean, it was an earned PK, but a PK nevertheless in the 90-plus minutes there. So Caleb Porter continues to coach for at least another week right now. Heel writes in, we need someone with character and leadership at the back. When we had Turnbull, he was aggressive and determined. Now we look comfortable and confused. Manseve 88 writes in, it was so bad. It was so bad. Ben Silva, our defense has been horrible in its form all 3 games this season. To me, it doesn't look like they're giving it their all on that side of the pitch. There's been a few instances this season where Koke Vegas makes a great save, and there's no one to track down or chase the ball. All in all, we're not going to win a lot of games if we let up 2 goals every week. I think that's a very fair assessment. We joke all the time that you just have to outscore your opponent, but if you don't have answers on those defensive sides, it doesn't make things really easy. Jake 404, Stoneman was atrocious, couldn't do the simple things, only attempts to create chances was to boot the ball up the field and pray. This one was a rough one to watch live. WTM, we need some new defensive players, or at least a defensive plan, or a swift kick in the behind. Something to get everyone's attention. J815, the defense has been pretty rough. Stoneman did not have the best game. Abukura torched them and looked like a stud at only 20 years old. So many over-the-top long ball passes that are low percentage or weren't even close to the player. Now, keep in mind, everyone, We didn't even open the stats. We haven't even started the homework. I kind of rewatched some of the game earlier today on my phone while doing other things, and mostly I was looking at the Loudon goals, like, were these world beater goals? And I think one of them absolutely, I mean, you can defend it, but if you don't, like, it's not exactly easy for him to bury that. But I think Loudon, as bad of a game as Rhode Island FC had, I think Loudon equally had one of the best games of their season so far. Like, they were playing with the chances they got. I know you looked at the XG early. They were converted them. Like, they were clinical to where that could be. And then the final comment here from Joe. Boys had a 50-50 game. They looked like the first half team versus Phoenix, but in the second half, they regressed to the team in Charleston. I watched San Antonio versus Lexington, by the way, and unlike us, they were able to come back from a 2-0 loss down to win 3-2. San Antonio also did the same thing, winning against Oakland Roots last week in that 26,000 person game. I think Joe's spot on here. Coach Lamosa has these guys playing at full speed, and we'll be seeing them in just basically 30 short days. They've now been able to go into 2 stadium openings, 2 inaugural matches of sorts, and it doesn't seem to be phasing San Antonio at all. Jason, I asked you at the beginning of this, was this the worst game we ever played? You said no. Some fans would disagree with you. Why wasn't this game the worst game of all time?
Like one of the things I mentioned, like effort. It still also felt as if the team was kind of in it. I think if you take away Abubakar's like worldy, that second goal he scored, maybe unstoppable. Obviously, they created some chances, but we kept them from scoring any other opportunities. I think that is a similar kind of opportunity where our defense is letting us down here. This could have easily just been a 1-0 loss. Maybe with some better finishing up front, could have easily been just another one of those draws with Loudon that we used to be known for until we dropped the ball there. But like I wasn't outside of Abubakar, I don't think that they were unstoppable.
No, I think we played against ourselves. I think we gave them a 12th man, if you will, in just either a lack of chemistry. We saw Grant Stoneman for the second time in 2 weeks now on that left side, something we did not see historically at all last season. We still have seen some disconnect between the back line and that midfield. I read John Morrissey's piece on kind of where Rhode Island FC is in transition right now, and they're almost playing a 4-2-4 at times where they either get caught in transition with too many people too far forward to help move the ball through, which is why we see the long ball, or they get caught with too many of the players they need further up the pitch on that backside, which is like when you see, especially when Koke comes so far out and you start to see the ball swing from right to left, the players that have to drop down to receive it. There's definitely a midfield problem right now, and I want to quickly be able to say, oh, it's got to be Maxi because Maxi's the new thing, but we haven't seen the best 11 on this field. I don't think so, at least. I think with the injuries, and I'm not talking the players we've never seen, like the profiles of Hugo and all that. I'm talking, if I had to pick the lineup as I would see it, it's not Zach Harifo at right center back, right?
Absolutely not.
It's arguable about the 2 forwards, whether it's Fuson or Chico maybe in that secondary space. Williams for sure has to be out there. But then it's Quizera. We've talked about this. It's Quizera, it's Harivo, it's Holstead, it's Rodriguez, and then what we thought would be, Nadarse, right? Because I think we all thought that. But then, okay, fine. If we don't have the ability, because we know we need Nadarse in that back line right now, then it is Fuson, and then so that means we get Chico up front. But we haven't seen that lineup at all yet. We've seen instances or like very quick moments of it, but we have not seen those 11 all on the field for at least the first 30 minutes either, to see like how can you set the pace for the game? How can you set the rules on what to expect on the night?
Yeah, and the way that this team plays, while we have seen some kind of Route 1 stuff with Williams here and there, the majority of the time we really work from the back. So if the back is having issues and not working, it kind of ruins everything else. I think that we've seen that while strikers can always be a little more clinical, I don't think we really have any problem going like forward right now. But the problem is just getting the ball to them, right? We're having issues at the back where we're giving things away. Some of that is maybe not progressing through the midfield as much as we want because we're moving midfielders back into, center back positions. And then we're playing two new people in the midfield too, right? Because like as great as Taimu has been, this is what his third game with us.
Didn't understand the Marky Barra Taimu. Let's call it a double pivot. I thought maybe coach had tried to do that so that he could unlock Maxi to just kind of like free float wherever Maxi needed to go. And then you just had that double pivot in the back because ideally it's supposed to be that midfielder triangle where they can rotate through and cover and overlap as needed. Like they all have different profiles, but they all know where to be. And so like I thought maybe that's why. It was a very interesting dynamic to see that. I have to say I don't think I agree with how coach set this team up. I don't think he got out coached, and I think there's a question about that in a second. But I don't think this was a bad game. What I'm still trying to figure, actually, sorry, that was a silly thing to say. This was a very bad game, but what I mean is I don't think it's the worst game. I think that I'm still trying to figure out, is this a cohesion issue with the new players, or is this that we lost something that we didn't realize we had when we had Turnbull and Dugan? Because we were really quick to highlight Dugan's defensive stats, but when you go back before Morris joined the team, we had a lot of draws and losses and not as many wins, right? Like those had not yet kind of started to come into fruition. Soccer is like chess. Your offense is only as good as your defense, and your defense is only as good as your offense. It's really easy at times to contribute to what the defense is doing just by the standards of tackles, duels, recoveries, clean sheets, all that. But thinking about a really good defender, a really good defensive press, especially when they want to go as high up the field as they do, we didn't win a lot of games with that defense back in the day, which meant that our front line couldn't figure things out. And I'm wondering if one of the attributes to that now is also our defense here. It's because it's the same defense that we had before we started clicking in that, late June or late July, August run, right? Like we only won 3 games up through July 15th in the entire season, right? Morris Dugan comes in, things suddenly change. If you think about it, like what was the X factor there, right? It's not just because Dugan was so good defensively. There was some sort of link, there was some sort of connection. Otherwise, this is the same back three that we had for the first half of the year that saw us get 1-2 wins before mid-July. So is that what we're in store for again? Like, are fans ready to deal with, and so far we're worse off than we were in 2024, right? This is technically a poorer season already after game 3. We had 2 points in our first 3 games last season. Now we only have 1 point. The benefit right now, and I joked about it online, Hartford is still behind us, so at least we don't have to eat our crow as well.
Yeah, maybe in some weird way, making it all the way to the final has brought that levels of expectation up so high that people don't understand, like, why is this team struggling? They made it to the final. But when the reality is, although we kept a lot of the same players, it's not exactly the same team.
Right. But I mean, I don't think anyone's taking the expectations that we made it to the finals. I think people are starting to understand, like, we've only scored 1 goal in 3 games. The last 5 games,
2. I count own goals.
I mean,
so like as creation in the sense of
sure.
It doesn't count for the stats.
Sure. But I'm talking
our players forced that goal to happen.
And yes, but also by the stats, we've only scored 1 goal ourselves. Yeah. So where's the disconnect? Because like if you're getting, and remember we talked about this, Loudoun, like they win 2-0 or they get beat 0-2. Where was the closeness of the game? Like where was it to where this wasn't a 3-2 game or a 2-1 game? What is happening here that we can't find? We have good players on this team, so I think the thing we'll figure this out. And I hope Kano figures this out. But I guess I want to ask you, if you had to pull a positive out of this game, is there something already that you like quickly were able to notate, something you saw as like, okay, when we talk about this, so that we're not all doom and gloom, was there something that you were like, okay, I see it, I see something
out of this one specific game?
Mm-hmm.
Not so much. I mean, it's I could say that the players continued to fight and try. it wasn't going their way, obviously, but we didn't see them just kind of put their heads down and just like, I don't know, we'll pass the ball around in the back and play keep away or something. Like, it felt like they were continuing to try and implement, what they thought Kano's plan was, but maybe there's still some issues there in terms of gelling and finding these new players into the system. We've seen some change here, injuries. It's only the third game. We started last year slow. I'm not concerned yet.
I'm not worried, and I want to make sure that that's something we clearly advocate. I think I don't think, though, at the same time, that I'm not worried because we saw what we could do last year. We've been in this predicament before. I'm not worried, but I'm also not just automatically attaching to saying, "Oh, but we're going to go back to the final," because this is what we did last year. Like,
no, yeah,
we cannot assume that we're going to get to the same results because this is kind of how we're starting off again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say my positive was Mark Ibarra. Mark Ibarra getting the start. It may not look like it, but when you look on the stat column, he was actually the best player on the field. Ironically, he didn't get to play the full 90, which I thought was a mistake. I thought he was probably having a better game than just about every other single player out there. I will be curious now. What does that advocate for on coach trying to figure out this Taimu and Mark situation? It can't be both of them. It just can't. Maybe there'll be one more game because Zach Haribo got a red card. But other than that, like, it's got to be either or. And again, it's only one game, but Mark gets his chance again. He gets to start. He gets to start alongside Taimu and has the best game of any Rhode Island FC player on the night. So don't know what, it's too early, but like, that's my positive, is Mark got to go out there and have a good game. And Mark mostly always has good games. He's such the unsung hero. So let's get into these questions. Everyone grab your whatever you're going to be hanging out and drinking or just trying to get through this podcast, because it's going to be a bit depressing tonight. So, and I promise this is just water, but
yeah.
You ready to do this?
Yeah.
All right, let's jump in.
So Faye here says, "Can you make the pain stop?"
I mean, Faye, I don't know what your pain is. I'm assuming it has something to do with Rhode Island FC. We've been here before.
Head on, apply directly to the forehead.
Yeah. I mean, see your doctor, obviously, for any actual issues that you have if it's pain. But I mean, the reality is this, it's too early. We are 2 favorable results away, and we're back to like 5th place in this table. You got to at least get to the first quarter of the games before it's going to get more difficult to climb or to slide. And the other thing too is, ironically, we've now played at least 2 really good teams in the USL Championship. We always knew Charleston was going to be a good team. Loudon is now, I think, in second
place with 9 points, behind Louisville.
And I think Abukar is having, I think he's now Golden Boot as of right now.
Yeah, probably.
So, I mean, like, this isn't a team that we should have smashed. It was always a team that we knew, like, a draw would have been favorable, especially away at Zagreb Field. So if you're in pain and it's not due to the need of medical attention, I would just say, breathe. You have friends. There's a supporters group. We will get through this just fine. And then when we get our first victory at the very first game at Tidewater, or maybe, I don't know, who knows, we'll see at that point, you'll feel relieved of all pain and ailments. Next question here. Kevin writes in, "Love the show. I love seeing Williams and Dequa out on the pitch at the same time. It feels like it makes us much more dangerous in the attacking end. Is this something we will see more of?"
I think definitely for the time being right now, until we figure out what is going on the right wing back position. I think we'll continue to see Busan used on one of those wingback positions until kind of everyone is healthy, and then coach has some more kind of decisions on who goes where. But honestly, I do agree. I've seen a lot of good sparks there. I really like how Chico has really kind of accepted that role as like a facilitator, almost a second striker. He's popping up on the sides, trying to set other people up. And I thought they looked very dangerous. I think that they're, maybe with some more combination play between the two, that could be a lethal combo there. If the rest of everything behind them gets sorted out.
It's definitely not a Chico problem right now.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Just because he hasn't produced goals yet, he has a contribution, and the goals will come. So, I think it is a defensive thing right now.
And then Ray here wants to know what games left before the home opener are winnable.
Well, Oakland should be winnable. There's no reason, like, Oakland will probably be the first panic button hit for me if we can't go, and maybe the result isn't a win. I think we should be able to very much win. That team is not doing well right now. One, they're definitely acclimating to a new environment. They're also adjusting to the late withdrawal and removal of Johnny Rodriguez from that team. They got rid of every other like striker profile they had for the most part. Like Don Dwyer didn't come back to that team. Memo Rodriguez didn't come back to that team last season.
Your favorite goalkeeper didn't come back to that team?
My favorite goalkeeper did not come back to that team. That is absolutely correct. I wonder where he went. I don't want to give him the power of like knowing he got Google
can't
search.
Say his name, so.
But I'm curious where he landed. But
I watched that game.
Which one?
Almost the entirety of the one that just happened this weekend. It was a 0-0 draw between Oakland and Las Vegas.
Did you see the controversy of that, by the way?
What was the specific controversy?
So the Lights admin posted that.
Oh yes, that part. Yeah.
It's we're playing in your old teams, your old team now in our home and your new home or whatever. Like they're just throwing shade that the A's were now a Las Vegas team, even though technically this season they're playing in some minor league ballpark in Sacramento for one more year. But it was a nasty look. I saw a lot of people like. And here's a lesson for Rhode Island FC fans. Don't ever do this. Okay. Like I'm dead serious. Don't ever do this. They went and found the social media manager's like LinkedIn profile information and started doxing him. It's like, it's all in jest. And, you should be more mad that Johnny Rodriguez was on that team than the A's left you. Like that's a whole different problem with a whole different ownership group. Like it was really ugly. Like don't ever be that, Rhode Island FC fans. You're better than that.
But yeah, anyways, I watched that game and it was a very boring game. Both teams looked pretty bad. Not a lot of threat from either of them. Oakland was very sloppy in the back. The one thing that I would maybe be worried about is that ultimately they didn't score any goals. But when they eventually figured out how to get the ball into the final third, you could see there was maybe almost something there. So with our luck, maybe they would figure that out against
us. As long as we just don't pass the ball directly to them in our final third, maybe things will look up from there. No, I think Oakland's actually the only game where we get points right now because Detroit, I don't know if people are actually paying attention to the table. Detroit's in third place. So, I mean, you look, ironically, of the teams we've played in the East, Charleston is the furthest down the table. Like Phoenix is probably, I think they're at the same position as us on the western side of things, but that means Loudoun and Detroit, teams that when we first thought about this before anyone played, we were like, oh, they're going to be middle of the table. We've now played the number 2 and number 3 team in our first 5 weeks.
I guess the one thing I'll say too is the way this league works. Who knows what the table's going to look like at the end of the season? Maybe we're just playing some of these teams at the wrong time. Ironically, I'm pretty sure I just saw something about Westchester is unbeaten.
Yeah,
unbeaten.
Yeah, even though Connor McGlynn got a goal, and it was a pretty good goal, by the way. It was.
Granted, that's not technically a league game, but it may be not going to be as easy.
Well, I mean, okay. Here's the thing, though. Like, we want points. We want to win. We want to beat.
A win
our
is
teams.
a win, and that momentum can be carried through to the next match, no matter what competition you're in. Granted, it might not help with our table standings, but it could boost the confidence before the home opener.
Yeah, and the other thing we're not really talking a lot about because we just don't have the details yet. That Westchester game is not we're going to go Oakland roots, right? We should be able to beat that team. If at best we get a draw, as long as we're not forcing errors to get the draw,
better performance.
Yeah, as long as like
what you want to see.
If a team finds a way and we didn't do anything wrong, like sometimes that's the way it goes, right? But Detroit, that's not looking great right now, and we've not done well in Detroit. But then between Detroit and Westchester is the Open Cup. Round 3, We just don't know our assignment yet. It's going to be on that April 12th or April 13th. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, it will be after Oakland, but before. It'll be before Detroit. It'll be a Wednesday or Tuesday game, and then it's a midweek game, and then we go to Detroit. We're not going to be doing it, especially if that Open Cup game is Hartford. That's the one we got to get the points on. Then it's got to be Hartford. So
Yeah.
Listen, it's early in the season. Remember, again, we did not get our first win in club history until 420 against the Las Vegas Lights away. So just constant endurance here is what's going to be the name of the game.
Just like winter takes a little while to get warm over here to get the rust out.
So I mean, at this point, yeah, maybe the only ones that are the Open Cup and the Jägermeister Cup games. I don't know, but brace ourselves. Next question here. Sean writes in, is this result on the players or is this on Kano? Have teams just figured us out?
I'd be very hesitant to put blame on people. We're 3 games in. That being said, if we want to try and, look at this, have teams figured us out? Yes. Last year, they didn't know who we were. We haven't changed our style of play a whole lot. I think Maxi, when he gels with the team, can add an X factor that maybe we didn't have when it comes to our midfielders. But that's yet to be seen. I think we saw flashes of that in Phoenix. There were some combination play in that kind of towards the end of that first half when we scored our second goal, where they were flicking the ball to each other, one touch passing back and forth. No, the combination started to kind of break through Phoenix's attack there. So maybe that could be, a precursor of what we can see later on in the season. When it comes to Kano, he's done so much for us in terms of getting us to that final in the first year. He 9 out of 10 times puts out a competitive team. Maybe they don't always win, but that's just the nature of this game. There's only so much he can do. Like you had mentioned, soccer often can feel like a chess match, and he's still a young coach, and there's a lot of experience in this league that he is still learning himself. And then as we move that back to the players, as much as of a chess match as it can be, it's a chess match with dice rolls. So if a player is just not having a great night, sometimes there's nothing he can do. And then we have injuries. We've swapped some players out. So there's only so many tools at his disposal right now. I think it's too soon though to really be dishing out blame here. Give it a few more if we get to the home opener and we have lost every single game, then I think I wouldn't be saying anything ridiculous, but I think it would be appropriate to maybe grill them a little more and say what are you guys doing? Something needs to change.
When I hear a question is this on Kano? I think when you look at all the unfavorable results that occurred last season against him, I think there was only one game where he was actually out coached, that he just, on the night didn't prepare correctly, didn't anticipate the variables. And I do think it was the Pittsburgh game where
that one
he set up,
we got sucker punched in the face.
He set up, he had an idea of how he wanted to set up. It was with Jack Panayiotou out on the wing. And he had an idea of what he thought the game would be based on how Lily Ball's played and constructed. And that was one of the first nights that Jackson or whatever, Jaqueson played for them. And Bob Lilly played it was still Lily Ball, but he played player to player. He profiled and matched them up right. And Kano got in his own head and he chopped and changed, which Kano has done a lot of over his career so far with this club. And I just don't think he put the best tactics and the best players to deal with what the Riverhounds were going to be. I kind of look at, I said it earlier, I have not seen what I think is the best starting 11. I don't understand when we see Stoneman suddenly on the left, what is the unlock there? I don't know it. I'd love to find out. Maybe I'll ask. But I think that, you can say the players had a bad game, right? The all of the players need to look at the mirror and say like, hey, like this was, am I proud of the performance I had? And none of them should be able to say yes, with the exception of Mark Ibarra. I think Kano owns a little bit of that because he selected who would be there. And again, we said this after the Phoenix game and the Charleston game. He's making 45-minute halftime substitutions right now. So like if it's player injury or if he's protecting legs, if he, like I don't know
Or
what he's trying to do.
Coaches do that when they realize something is not working.
Right. But like if that's the case, like if these players don't need to protect the minutes, what did he see in the practices going on in the week that's how he wanted to set up? That's the thing I don't know, and we'll probably never get to know that, because if we shared that on a podcast, that definitely helps his enemies get ready to take him on, right? So I think there's a little bit of Kano ownership here, but it's also early, and you want to see the chop and change, you want to see the experimentation, because he has to figure this out now.
Yeah, get this out of the way earlier in the season as opposed to later.
Right. So it is what it is, but I think if I had to weigh it on scales, it's much more the players had a bad night, and Kano, no reason to get pitchforks even out of the shed just yet.
Yeah, I mean, and real quickly, like you brought up that Pittsburgh match. That match was probably worse than the Loudon match. That I don't think did we ever even have any chances in that game.
I don't know. To me a worst match, and I'd love to hear what the fans think about this. So when you guys hear this, comment, let us know. To me, a worse game is not a game where you get completely played out. Like, so the USL Cup final, I don't think that was the worst game we've ever played. I think it had the highest table stakes, and we did not do good at all, but we didn't make mistakes. We just got destroyed.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's going to happen in competitive sports. The other team is just going to be better than you on the day. For me, a worst game is when you're in the game and you take yourself out of the game. Like, could Kano have done anything different in that final? I don't know. I don't know what he could have, like, I honestly do not know what he could have done differently, other than maybe as soon as he found out, had them all out there to try to acclimate them faster if altitude was an issue, which we don't need to go through that. If a team's just better on the night, that's fine. But you said it earlier, Loudon wasn't better. The world class goals that were scored against us, that was one layer to it, but we didn't do anything to put ourselves back in that match. We didn't deserve even a draw, right? Like, to me, when you mess your own game plan up and you should be in the match, that makes it a worse result. So like the 4-1 Tampa beating, I don't think so.
I mean, that was early.
Sure, but even then, like we didn't know what we could do yet. We hadn't seen a team like that tear us apart. I think the only games last year that were like as bad as this, probably Phoenix Rising, because we didn't have an answer for anything. Remember, that indirect free kick came late in the game.
It was like the 89th minute.
Right. So that's not like we were in it. We caused so many problems for ourselves in that. The early Detroit City loss that we had, that was more closer to a Bob Lilly result than it was the Phoenix or Loudon. I kind of think that when we make mistakes and remove ourselves from the game, and we don't, like, if we'd gotten a goal, at least you could say you learned something from the night. I don't know what you learned. Like, I don't know what tactically you were able to say as a positive. Like I said, the only my positive was Marky Barr as a person, as a player. I don't think that him lining up and linking to Taimu and Maxi is an actual lesson learned. Like, can they do it? Sure. Is it going to get you anything out of it? Probably not. So I do think it was one of the worst games, but I still think that the worst game we played was Phoenix Rising last season. I still think, because we could have gotten that game. We could have gotten back in that game very easily, and multiple different times, not just the failed PK. Like, we could have potentially been in that game, and we never gave ourselves the chance. And we just kind of, like, I don't want to say gave up, but it was pretty bad. Actually, you know what, though? I forgot. There was another one. It was probably worse. It was the Colorado Springs first loss. We played ourselves out of that game.
Yeah.
Remember Turnbull getting super mad and just pushing the back of the player for the third goal with the PK? That actually may have been our worst game ever.
Yeah, that one was bad. For me, I don't always get as frustrated as mistakes. They happen. And even the result, a lot of it comes down to what are the efforts from the players, the vibes, the feeling, the flow. That there are times when you can watch a match and realize that even if they're not in it, it feels like they're trying to, and that maybe there's just some little spark that's missing that sometimes it just doesn't work out for you.
Sure.
But you can at least say, you know what, I felt on another day, it might have worked out different for us. Where there's some that like for me, when I look back at that Detroit game, the 2-0 loss at home earlier on in last season, I never for 1 second felt like we were ever going to do anything in that match. Like that, we were just outclassed, played off the pitch. Nothing was working. That was just, that for me is why it was a bad game. I felt right off the start, like after because I think was it both first half goals, I think, for them? It never felt like we were going to get back into that match.
Right.
No matter what changes he made throughout the momentum was solely in their favor.
It's so weird to hear you say that, because my ideation of that is completely different. Like your cost evaluation of these is that, like, if we have no business being in that game, it makes it the worst. Whereas mine is, if you have the ability to get something out of it, if there's value to be grabbed, and then you drop the value, like, it's just, I've never heard this from you before, so we're kind of hashing this out live.
Yeah, I guess, but like, so what value did we get out of that game though?
Which one?
The Detroit.
Nothing. Just like Pittsburgh. So that's why I'm saying, like, they're not. Those were bad games. They were bad results, but sometimes you just play a better team on the night.
Yeah, and
when you are as good as the other team you're playing and you don't get the job done, that is a worse result, in my opinion.
For me, it's the spirit of the game. At that point, it's almost like we were outclassed. Like, it's like fighting into different weight classes.
Sure.
Right. Like, we never should have even played
exactly. That's exactly it. You don't put a featherweight against a heavyweight and expect something to go your way.
So there's no competition. So that, and for me, at least my perspective, that makes it a bad game.
That's a bad lineup. That's a bad setup. That's not a bad fight, because you shouldn't. That's not even a fight. Whereas if you have two featherweights and one of them comes to the game drunk, or comes to the match drunk, like, and then can't perform, like, that's, what I mean? Like,
but as a Rhode Island fan, what do I get out of that?
A drunken featherweight match? I don't know.
Where we just get sucker punched, knocked out. Like, it's in a tight loss. At least I saw something there.
Maybe
there's some sort of spark. It was the hope, right?
It's the hope.
There was absolutely no hope in.
As a state that's founded on hope, you should know better. You should know better. Go get the flag, put it around your shoulders right now.
But at least to me, that's more of an enjoyable experience. Whereas the Detroit game or like that Pittsburgh away, it's like I could walk away from this match and not miss anything.
Let's move on, because I think we're never going to see eye to eye on that. Let's get in. So that was the game one. We'll unpack the statistical parts, and we'll try to cherry pick the details that we think make sense when we get back into rewatching the game and really break down the stat lines. In the meantime, let's get through the other questions. Some of these are carryovers from the week where we didn't go, and let's start here.
Yeah, Susan here wants to know, how do you feel about the NWSL team rebranding from Boss Nation to Boston Legacy? Do you have a different name in mind?
I do. I mean, I said Boston Witches when it first came out. I thought that was. I know Salem is the witch part, but like, it still felt fun. Witches are, it's hard to find a mascot, if you will, or a. I don't even know what you call a team's theme. I don't know what you call it. Anyways, to find one that is female, like intrinsically female, like, that's always difficult. Like, I think with the rugby league, the Boston Banshees, I love that, because a banshee is always going to be female implied, like a mermaid, like a siren. So finding something that you could do that, like, I love Orlando Pride, because it's a play off of the Lions for Orlando, so it works. Legacy doesn't really make sense for anything that's going on within the Boston proper, as I understand it. When I macro out and look at Legacy, like, you've got like the North Carolina Courage, you've got the DC Spirit, so it feels like they were like, okay, what's that ethereal thing that we could call ourselves? Legacy just feels like they went back to NWSL's headquarters, like top bin, and said, hey, like, what are the names you had on like reserve? Like, we just need to take one of these now and play it safe. I don't think it's bad, but when you fumbled so badly on the initial launch and brand of your club. Legacy doesn't seem like it fixed it. Legacy doesn't, to me, say we canvassed the entirety of our fandom. We did some really good market research analysis on what is the next step. It kind of feels like, hey, NWSL, what name did you have that we could take?
I think it's a better name, but I also would say maybe if I knew that RAFC wasn't going to get a women's team, I would be maybe a little more invested in this. But at this point, it's very much like that this is for Bostonians to care about.
Massachusetts people
Yeah.
is what Massachusettsans. But yeah, Carlos writes in thoughts on Hearts of Pine and Westchester so far this year.
Both have been doing pretty well so far. I think both undefeated, right? I mean, Hearts of Pine hasn't.
They have one game so far, official game. It's 0-0. Yeah. They won the advancement.
And they won their Open Cup. So, I did not watch the most recent 0-0. I watched almost all of I think maybe I missed a little bit of the 4-0 thrashing there.
Seeing Nate Messer score that goal and being so excited and so happy. Like as soon as he grabbed the Hearts of Pine crest, it was just like, you have a very special player in Nate Messer. Cherish it, relish it, because you never know what tomorrow holds. There's no promise for tomorrow with Nate Messer.
I mean, hey, I guess it's good to see some of the Northeast teams are having a good time.
I think that's a really good way to say it.
And then Brandon here wants to know if there is any update on Danny and Jackson. P.S. Matt, you've got the Zach Haribo thing wrong.
I will not take these accusations. He's referring to Zach. We talked about Zach Haribo most likely being injured, and then he goes and plays, for what 30 minutes of the game this weekend. I guess I just was early in my projection that Zach Haribo was going to miss a game. I thought it was going to be this one, and Zach Haribo with that red card earned himself a vacation for next week. So as for Jackson, actually, Jason was able to give an update last week on the pod. He ran into Mr. Lee at the Phoenix game,
and then we saw he was listed on the bench here,
and so Jackson was already ready to kind of come back, and then we did see him in the lineup there. So this may be a little bit of a carryover question as well. So he should be good. I've already heard people online starting to do the whole like, oh, Jackson Lee would have saved that kind of stuff. It's fun to hear the competition of it, but I don't think Koke has done anything wrong yet this season that you would ever need to be suspicious of it. Rivera, I don't know the extent of his injury. He has not been at practice like at all. So sometimes they're there off to the side. Sometimes they're in like a special area doing, special therapy kind of drills, stretches, and whatnot. They're part of the club for the day, but they're removed. Rivera wasn't even at the last practice session, which tells me it could be longer term. But again, it's hard. Like Kano is never going to tell me or any of the media people what these are because he's not required to. And there's a real strategy in making sure your opponent doesn't know how to line up. Haribo, for all intent, should be a lock-on starter unless he's having a bad run of performance. And so being able to not ascertain if your player's going to be there, it's a thing. So don't know the extent of it, but I would push, if Rivera's not even at training, I would push at least a couple of weeks before we see anything. That being said, I'm going to get these wrong all the time. All I can tell you is what I see, what I know, and I report. Outside of that, like, it's always going to be kind of a crapshoot. So, yeah, I don't know yet, but we know it's some sort of injury, and just bear with, and hopefully we'll be able to still continue to field an 18-person roster. I think next week, if Rivera is out, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. We only have 23 players, but 3 keepers. So I think we would actually be down a player. Would we only field 17 players for the Oakland game?
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe we bring 2 keepers and then we dress 2 keepers on the bench for the day. So that'll be interesting.
To get subbed in to play midfield.
I bet you Jackson Lee. I bet we should find
Jackson Lee gets subbed in, and then Koke pushes up to midfield.
One of those 2 players at some point in their career must have played a different role. Robert writes in, Brett Johnson's other club, Ipswich Town, is in the basement and probably going to get relegated. do you think he'll still be bullish when they go down? That's first off, before you answer, guys, let's give Brett Johnson a little faith here. They're like 9 points out from Wolves at this point, but
it was a lot closer earlier on.
Anything is possible, and they have a game against Wolves, so that's 6 points to swing. I don't know what the rest of each of those teams' respective lineups are. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But let's give Brett Johnson a little bit of faith and a little bit of support here.
So what I would say is that they get a pretty big chunk of change for just being in the Premier League. They're going to get parachute payments. From there, if this club is well managed, they could come back up the following year, and you can continue to get those injections of cash, right? You get those lump sums for being in the Premier League, you get those parachute payments. And if you can continue to invest that into the club, you can slowly kind of like rise the tide of that team's like projection, so that, you know, maybe the following year, maybe they just sneak in, right? And then maybe they get relegated again the following year. It's very much a long-term project. You don't build like the success of a team like that overnight.
Sure.
It's going to take a long time for them to continue to inject some capital into that team, to build up the profile of the team, make it a destination for players. Maybe even like I'm not too familiar. I don't know if they have like maybe a really good academy.
So actually,
to continue to
real fast to cut you off. They just either finished or released the final plans for a massive training academy site.
There you go.
So like they're investing a ton in the longer term vision of it, which should bode really well when we finally get that America to England connection and start seeing some like young Ipswich players potentially, or like players that haven't been able to break out, like come play for Rhode Island. That's my hope. But Ipswich is not this fleeting thing that went up and expects to go back down. They may still hit the turmoil of it, but they're investing in the future. They're not just taking the money and running like a certain Glazer family with Man United.
But yeah, and that's the right way to do it. To look at this as like, hey, we made it to the top there in terms of getting to the Premier League. If we want to stay there, that needs to be a longer term project.
Yeah. I will say though too, he is still very bullish. I mean, I don't know if did you listen to the USL All Access interview with President? It wasn't Jeremy Allenbaugh. It was McDonough.
I just saw a few clips online. I didn't listen to the whole thing.
So he credits two owners primarily as responsible for swinging the vote to ProRel for the USL, and he credits Nagel for Sacramento Republic, because Nagel owns a club. I forget which one he owns. I think it's in League One, maybe in the Championship, and then Brett Johnson. And that Brett Johnson and Nagel had to go around to the league and explain to a very like big degree on like why ProRel works and how it can work, so that all of these clubs, you know, they're all worried about their evaluations. They're all worried about not the operating costs. Like that was a very interesting thing. No one was tackling this is going to cost me more money to run this club. It was the projected evaluations, right? Like if I go down, my club is no longer worth, you know, the $25 million. It's worth $9 million. So they did kind of a PR and, you know, explanation of it, and full credit, like those two people probably helped get ProRel over the finish line. So one day when we get a USL, you know, Hall of Fame, we're gonna have to see Brett Johnson get that bronze plaque or that bronze cast of him as the man that kind of started this here. But he's very bullish still on that.
And then Tim B here says, what clubs do you think are most likely to join us in D1?
I love that we are in. I respect. I mean, obviously, I think you have to be, especially after I just said Brett Johnson's kind of like responsible for this. Obviously, he's going to be a big part of it, even if he hasn't said it yet himself. I mean, Lou City's easy. I'll go really quick. Maybe I'll try to throw 5 out there, and maybe you can just, because we need 12. So I'll do 6. You do 5. We'll go from there. We know Rhode Island City. We know that one, right? Okay, so Rhode Island City. I'll go Lou City. That's a very easy one. I think that Pittsburgh is a team that they're working on a stadium enhancement, a revitalization, and I think they're in the right demographic for it. I think that Oakland, just seeing 26,000 people, they only need half of that, less than half, and they are basically going to be able to maintain it. And they have a stadium online. I'm going to say New Mexico United. I
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I think Orange County. They have a really bad park problem right now. Like the park's not capable of it, but that ownership group is English based. They want in on it, so they'll find the investment vehicle needed for it. And then I'm gonna say like another East Coast team. I think if Indy sorts their whole drama with the MLS, not MLS thing that's going on, I think Indy is the other one.
I think Charleston is a big shout. I mean, they have a lot of history in this league. They've been around even before it was, considered USL. I think like 97 or something.
93. They
93.
predate the MLS. So the president of USL actually called Charleston out specifically and said that they want Charleston in the Division One, but they have to go back and work the PLS agreement out because Charleston's never going to get 15,000 people to a game, but they're a pillar of the soccer community, not just USL. Like you said, like they've been around for so long. It shouldn't be a standard of, oh, well, you can only get 10,000 to a game, so we have to not allow you to go into Division One because of that. So USL kind of tipped their hand in that one statement. They're very keen on making sure that they can adjust the requirements so that especially teams that do promote from like USL 1 to championship all the way up to premier in 3 seasons, Union Omaha, if all they can field is 7,000, like they shouldn't be punished for getting up to the top.
Yeah. Then we look at a few other things here, like, Sacramento has flirted with MLS.
Easily. They're gonna be in.
I think it might be kind of maybe a little bit of a stadium issue, but there are so many people that live in like greater Phoenix area that you would think that they should be able to scrounge 15,000 people to show up to a stadium. It might need to be in a quote unquote better location or something, but
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the investment. Like after Johnson left, and I don't know if
I
Bear
don't know who
McKay's
their
still there.
owners are.
Yeah. So I mean, they have again because I'm not picking the places that are just like good products. I'm picking like with the demographics that can support casuals who only want to go to 3 or 4 games a year, but so many people are in that market that 3 to 4 games fills out the stadium on a regular basis.
Yeah, I just think that if that one's done right, that they could bring the amount of people needed. Who else are we missing?
I'll ask you three that I think are kind of like dark horses here: San Antonio, Tampa Bay, and Las Vegas. What do you think?
Tampa Bay, definitely another historic team that's been around since like the 70s. San Antonio has been doing well this year.
But they have a really nice stadium in Toyota Stadium. Like I feel like just on the dimensions, and San Antonio can field that many. It's a heavy enough market. I feel like they could do it.
Yeah, and sorry, what was the last one?
Like
Las
Vegas
Lights.
It's like Batista knew this was happening. He's getting a D1 team in Las Vegas before MLS can take over.
Yeah, and which is really interesting. It feels like a lot of the teams we picked are kind of West Coast heavy, maybe because we're looking at areas that can facilitate large populations to go to games. Like when we've left out like Birmingham Legion, who have a stadium to fit a lot of people, but they're not getting enough people to go out to those games.
No. So I think those are the I'm good with the start. And then of course, we don't know what the new teams coming online who will kind of buy their way right into the very first. Does Boise, who's building a 15,000 person stadium, Milwaukee, if they come online, Sporting Jacks. I'm sure Sporting Jacks is like salivating right now at like, oh, we were coming in and now, we're going to do this. The real question is, do the New York Cosmos return? That's what everyone wants to know.
They should.
I hope they do. I honestly do hope one day that Comicio gets his hands off of them and they are able to join some soccer presence. But let's keep going on here. Bob writes in, Kano mentioned we shouldn't just look at the English football pyramid to copy promotion and relegation. Which league would you like to steal homework from to copy or to build the American Pro Rel?
I kind of like the German playoff system where the one team gets an opportunity to kind of prove that they're like, no, that give themselves one last chance, where it's what the bottom two are automatically relegated.
Top two in the second league go up. And then the third team in the
bottom has the playoff.
Yeah, they play against the third place team.
Yeah.
In the Bundesliga too. Yeah, I think Portugal does it the same way. That is exciting. Yeah. I want that as well. I think that's a very good call.
Yeah, if not, I mean, at least some sort of playoff system would be fun. Maybe we put some sort of spin on it. I think that whoever gets first place though should get that automatic. But from there, I'm willing to have a little bit of wiggle room. I think that you kind of like earn it, right, for being the champion. But
so here's the question, right? And you just said it, and no one's talked about this yet in any of the things I've heard. Everyone's either like just really excited, or everyone's like, we got to be really careful how we do this, right? The way we have conditioned American fans
into that
on the supporter shield or like the first place positioning, it's always like this, like, hey, congrats, you had the best record of the season. We'll see you in playoffs. Who's going to get the cup? Do cups even matter anymore in a pro rail system?
Well,
because
but so what if you do this? What if, granted, you'd have to come up with some tiebreakers if it's the same team. But so,
dude, could you? I know where you're going with this.
Louisville, best record, gets a spot. Colo Spigs gets a spot for the next one, and then maybe that's it.
But like, could you imagine? Could you just think about what you're saying? You'd get second place in the league, and in any other pro rel, you're automatically advanced. But instead, you have to play in a 8-team knockout tournament that
to win
might get like that.
Which would be crazy, because then you could have some sort of eighth place team get promoted.
Oh, I don't know.
Just absolutely wild.
I don't know. I don't know if I could. And the other thing too, then, is though, like in our playoffs of champions, I agree that some sort of play out dynamic needs to unfold, but I think what we know as cups is going to go away very quickly.
No one will ever accept that. I think.
But I think that is
ingrained in.
Okay, here's the thing. You're Louisville. Like in your example, you're in the championship. For some reason, you didn't make it to D1, or you got knocked out. You're coming back up. You're in the clear. You're in first place. You're automatically advancing. Do you care about winning the championship cup trophy when you're getting to Premier League? Then at that point,
if your team gets money too for it, I mean, and the prestige of winning.
But the prestige is you won and you moved up. Like,
yeah. But at that point, you secured both spots.
I don't know. I see. Here's the thing, and no one's talking about it yet. But like, I really think that we are going to struggle with the identity, which is why we may need to find some like just uniquely American thing. I think people are going to struggle with, like, everyone wanted pro rel. It's now here, but pro rel and playoff systems outside of, like you said, the Bundesliga, that's going to be one of the most exciting things ever. That game every year to me is going to have more table stakes than watching like a MLS Cup final to a certain extent. Like, it's like, okay, whatever. It's 9 out of 10 times it's not going to be a team that I care about, but now I get to see the dramatic impact of like one team goes up, one team goes down. Like,
there's actual stakes for both sides, as opposed to like, I didn't win a trophy.
And I think in the Bundesliga they do a 2-leg. They do it like a champions qualifier. So I think it's 2 legs, and then it's on aggregate. In America, that won't stand. It'll be one leg. Ooh, who gets it then? The team that is going to go down always gets hosting rights, or do you find a neutral place?
I don't know. That's an interesting kind of pondering there. You would think for the, to give both teams some kind of revenue in a sense too, especially because that's how a lot of these teams make their money, is through ticket sales, is like make it a 2-legged affair.
Gosh, could you imagine you're already in, I mean, let's assume it gets to 20 teams. You're already in 18th place, and you have to play 2 more games at the end of the season, and it's just to stay alive. Like, whoa. Oh man, that's rough. But I do think playoffs need to be embedded in it, but I don't love the idea that an 8th place team can sneak in and get promoted to the Premier League. I don't know. That feels good.
Maybe it's just for a trophy, and just to say you're the best of the championship, but you don't get to move on.
You're literally flipping the script on how, like, people go, congratulations, you got the supporter shield, like, whoop-de-doo. I really do think, man, for as many soccer fans, as many people that are educated in the global game, I think we may see a dynamic shift. I think playoffs will still have to be there somehow. Maybe it's for like the third place.
Is that what the Jägermeister Cup is then at that point?
Maybe no, because that's like we've also, like, that's the FA Cup or whatever. Maybe the third place is this. Maybe it's teams 1 and 2 don't have to compete because they've already gotten their money. Team 1 got their trophy. I don't actually, with only 12 teams, by the way, I don't see it being more than 2 teams in the first few years.
Oh yeah, it's probably just 2.
So then first team goes up automatically, and then teams 2 through 4 do away and home legs to compete for the second spot.
But then the problem is that you have that playoff system that becomes kind of convoluted, and like, how do you even explain that to
There's gonna be a learning curve for
regular
everyone.
American fans? And they're just like, well, they won, so they're the champions. It's like, no, Louisville are the champions. They are now second place by winning this tournament.
But I don't know. Like I said, it's
difficult decisions
gonna be-
to make. That
it's going to be very difficult, and no one's really talking about it because everyone's just worried like we can't have the league fall apart or financially collapse. Next question.
Battle Royale, put 12 balls on the field.
Oh, what, like that I show speed league that they do? Like, we're going to do some multiplier halfway through. You're going to have 15 people on the pitch for 10 seconds.
If they get enough coins, there's multi balls, and they just balls shoot up from.
Your coach is allowed to enter the field of play for 97 seconds.
Penalties, but with the coaching staffs.
No, the coach doesn't have to play. He can just go knock people out on the pitch.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. There's no rules. Like, there's no rules in this setup. Next question.
All right, and Nancy wants to know here. I know it's early, but are these results a sign that we need to sign another player?
I've had conversations with coach. I've had conversations with the front office. Right now, there's no players on the radar. There are players that are there regularly every single day for practice that are not PC guys that are helping like build out. Because remember, again, like, you want to play 11 aside, you need,
especially with some injuries, like,
right.
you
So
need people.
You need some people, and there's a fourth keeper who I see all the time there, and the very first time I saw him, I thought it was Will Meyer, but it was not Will Meyer. He's been there every single practice session as well. I don't know how to answer it other than to say, like, they haven't found a player yet that makes this team better. Like, they need this kind of player. So when you're already at what is it? They're at 23, which is with the injuries. You don't realize it. I don't think we will see that. I think Kano has a fiduciary responsibility to the club to wait till these players get healthy and then say, like, hey, I am missing this one piece, and if you allow me to go get it, I will do amazing things. Or it's kind of a Morris Dugan thing where we wait to see who in MLS is just not getting minutes but needs minutes, and then maybe there's a deal that can be brokered. Because again, Morris Dugan's the best bit of business we've done so far as a club. We got a free player to get us to the championship final. So I don't think we're going to see a player anytime soon. But like the guy that called me out earlier about Zach Haribo, I'm never right 100%. So I wouldn't be surprised. But if we do, it probably won't happen until the quote unquote summer transfer window.
I think it's too early. But what I wouldn't bet on it, but I would not be surprised as if what we end up needing is either another center back and or like right wing back.
Oh, so those don't get rid of Steven Turnbull is what you're saying.
So that kind of seems to be the area of issue. Like, we have tons of midfielders, right? We're like, at the end of the last match, we just threw on Amos and Joe, right? So there's plenty of midfielders / forwards, but now it all of a sudden feels kind of light back there, where we're having to push midfielders back.
Yeah, and Turnbull's not even playing for Birmingham right now. It's just a great deal across the board. Let's get into this next question here. Don writes in, it really feels like the club dropped the ball on parking again, and he quoted it in capital letters in his form submission, again in year 2. It is very uncoordinated, and the hidden fees with no follow-up for my ticket rep isn't a great look.
I mean, parking in a kind of city / neighborhood area, it's always going to be a struggle. The first year is very much they did the best they could with having a temporary stadium in a university. I don't know too much what to
listen. One, Don, if you're having problems with your ticket rep, just, I don't know how you're trying to communicate to them, but there are multiple channels, and the club does not want to, I can say this, the club doesn't want anyone to feel alienated or that they're unresponsive. I know that the ticket reps were dealing with a lot of stuff last week as it went live. So if something slipped through the cracks, reach out. I won't, I you got to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's a hard job to do, and remember, like, there's I think 5 ticket account executives, so 5 for 5,000 people. Like, that's a lot of juggling to do, because I think there's 5,000 season ticket members or something close to that. So that's a lot of work to do. So if you're having a bad experience, I encourage you, if you need like the contact details for the customer service, like generic accounts, like I can always share that if you need to, but don't feel like the club doesn't have your voice in their concern or their minds if you're having a bad experience. And also just don't think that it's ever intentional from the organization. Uh, you know the I haven't talked to the club since it happened. I don't know if they were aware of the fees that were attached to the parking purchase. It's it's really easy. Like, I always look at it as the Ticketmaster. I've always called it like the Ticketmaster problem of, you see your concert that you want to go to, or your sporting events, like it's $25. You're like, I can spend $25 today. You go and you hit the purchase for the ticket. You've got your $25 ticket,
And then it's 40,
convenience fee,
50.
online purchase requirement fee. I would not be surprised when they built this out if they had said and worked out the pricing and said, okay, this is what the cost will be. And then, you assume there's tax, but like, you never plan tax into your purchase because you're moving that price to the customer. I struggle to think that the front office administration intentionally knew that there were going to be these administrative fees, or these hidden costs, as people are calling it. Someone online said, like, you can't just say there's a cost. Like, there has to be an explanation or a breakdown of any surcharges that go on. And like, when you think about Ticketmaster, like, they break it all down, like the convenience fee, the service fee, and like, you can go and see what those are. That did just say like $41 in cost, like surcharge costs, and like, nobody knew about it. And then when you could go buy it directly with the reps, which, by the way, if you haven't bought your tickets yet for parking, you can call your ticket rep and bypass the hidden fee part of it. It's not a great look, but to me, that's more of a, no one operationally benchmarked it and tested it. Like, they got it all online, got it ready for the fans to go and consume it. And sometimes you just don't. In my world, in my line of work, it was like user acceptance testing, right? Like, you put yourself in the shoes of that person. What's the total experience from A to Z? Maybe they didn't get to do that. Again, they've got a lot on their plate. I agree that for anyone that feels that this was kind of a slight, it isn't a great look. But again, we all knew there were going to be some challenges, some trials, some tribulations in this year too. If this is something that breaks you because of the hidden fees or the frustration of how you had to get your parking, just take a step back. Just like you need to take a step back on the performance of this club right now. Trust and give them faith that they'll figure it out, and they'll either make right if you're really frustrated about it and like have the conversation. And if you feel like this club won't make right for it, then use the power of your wallet. Speak with your actions yourself, and don't go demanding people get fired or anything like that. Just say, hey, okay, you're going to charge me this much money. That's one less piece of merchandise that I don't buy, or I will not be, I won't be buying concessions at the stadium. Like, I don't want the club to be, fail, but like, consumers here are their customers. Like, the fans are their customers. You do have the ability to encourage and influence what happens, but there's no reason to be nasty or mean or rude about it. And I don't think we're even at that stage yet. I think that the club is going to do everything in their power to do things right. I've not lost a single ounce of faith in this group, because there's just no point yet. So just remember what's important to you, and if this is something where you need to reach out, there's ways to do it. You can have conversations. Like, this group is very accessible, just like the players were last year on the pitch. That's one of the beauties of a USL Division II product, is you can most times get to the people you need to get to and not be hidden behind protocols or operational protocols of bureaucracy.
Yeah, I think it's still early. We haven't even got to experience what a game day looks like and what that parking situation is like. I very much believe in giving people a chance when it comes to brand new things like this. At the same time, like you said, that accessibility wise, make sure that those pain points are known, and that if they don't do anything to rectify it, I mean, this is at the end of the day a quote unquote entertainment product. So vote with your wallet, and just, if that's gonna stop you from going, I hate to see it, but you need to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and maybe voting with your wallet is just going to the free parking lot, right? Like, I'm not going to be a part of your system, man. But I think it's just too early for that, and there's lots of other great things going on with like the public transportation, the bike riding. They did their first bike ride test over the weekend, so lots of great things going on there. Let's wait until there's a reason to get very very frustrated in the ecosystem there. Last question here.
Yeah, Travis wants to know: are they tearing down the Apex site or just stopping at the top of the pyramid? They could use more parking.
I agree. We could definitely benefit by having the entirety of the Apex site removed, but no, it's just the top of the pyramid. They stopped at that. There are still 3 nonprofits that
And I
are.
think that had nothing to do with RFC, right? That was wind damage.
Yeah,
or
it was
something?
just
Yeah.
superficial damage to a superficial top. It had nothing to do with the building's function. The Justin Allard guy who does Rhode Island Abandoned is phenomenal. Like, he's captured that in the past. But there's 3 nonprofits that lease out the building, so they'll be there through this season. I don't think their contracts are up anytime soon. The only thing that's going to knock that building down is if Hasbro ever announces that they're moving their headquarters there, because that's kind of been the carrot on the stick to try to keep Hasbro within the state. So if that happens, that building will come down faster than you can blink. But until then, I imagine it stays with Project Health CV, Sleep in Heavenly Place, and the Elisha Project, all leasing spaces inside there. I'm curious how those facilities all work, because they have a bunch of trailers there to use for like supplies and logistics, bringing their stuff in and out. So that's all got to leave so that they can use the parking space. But other than that, no. The pyramid without the pyramid will stay and still be there in a kind of lasting but not quite lasting experience. So those are the questions for the week. Always fun to talk to people. This is going to probably continue to be our, rough and tough, just how we feel, not backing any of it with like the kind of official stuff we try to do on the show on Thursdays. We'll still do these. When we do get the interviews back online and the player interviews, we'll probably just combine them with these. So we'll condense these down and like probably just get to questions and answers and then cut in the player audio, because I don't want to hit 3 episodes a week. That's when this becomes a job, folks. And this is supposed to be a passion project that Jason and I like to do on the sides for fun. So bad game, bad taste in my mouth. We move on to Oakland. We better get the result in Oakland. We'll talk about it later this week. Any final thoughts on your side?
No, looking forward to seeing another match. Hoping still got the faith out there, that it's gonna be better. It'll be all right.
All right.
I'm not broken and beaten down yet.
It's the hope hasn't killed us yet.
Not yet. And so, hey everyone, make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your coverage. And Blue Sky at RAFC Podcast, Instagram at Raising Anchor, and we've got a website, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchor's up, everybody.
Feels weird to say it this week, but Anchor's up. We'll catch you guys soon.